In 1958, before the sun was up over Duluth, Minnesota, a mechanic walked out into 30 below cold, lifted the hood of his truck, and pulled the dipstick before he ever turned the key. He wiped it on a rag that cost him about $1 a dozen, pushed it back down, drew it out again, and read the oil in the gray light. Then he crouched and looked at the ground beneath the engine for a fresh spot, checked the coolant, and only then did he start the motor and let it come to life slow. It took 1 minute. He did it every single morning of his working life, on his own truck, and on every fleet vehicle he was trusted with, and in a city where the cold killed engines by the dozen every winter, his motors lived twice as long as anyone else's. His neighbors thought it was a fussy habit. It was not. It was the cheapest insurance in the world against the single most expensive thing that can happen to a car. And there is a reason it worked that almost no driver alive understands. It has to do with what happens in the first 30 seconds after a cold engine turns over. Here is that reason, and it is the whole foundation of the ritual, so understand it before anything else. When a car sits overnight, gravity does its slow work. The oil that was clinging to the cylinder walls, the camshaft lobes, the valve stems, and the bearings drains away, down past all of it, and settles in the pan at the bottom of the engine. By morning, those critical surfaces up top are very nearly dry. Then you turn the key, and for a few seconds, before the oil pump can build pressure and push oil back up to where it belongs, the engine runs on almost nothing, metal grinding against metal in the places that were built never to touch. It takes 15 to 45 seconds for that oil pressure to reach the far corners of the engine, and in a cold engine with thick cold oil, it takes even longer. Every one of those seconds is wear that no amount of gentle highway driving will ever inflict. The numbers, once engineers began to measure them, are almost hard to believe. It is commonly estimated that somewhere between half and 3/4 of all the mechanical wear an engine will suffer in its entire life happens during cold starts, in those first moments before the oil catches up. Some estimates run higher still. One figure cited in the engineering literature is that the wear an engine undergoes in the first 30 seconds after a cold start equals the wear it would take from around 500 miles of driving fully warmed up. 30 seconds against 500 miles. That is the toll of the cold start, paid every single morning. And the Duluth mechanic understood it in his hands long before anyone put a percentage on it. He knew that the dangerous moment in a car's day was not the highway. It was the driveway, at dawn, in the cold. And it is not only the drained oil that makes those seconds so hard. A cold engine needs a richer dose of fuel to fire, and that extra raw gasoline washes down the cylinder walls and strips away what little oil film remained there, leaving bare metal sliding on bare metal at the worst possible moment. The cold oil that is left behind is thick as syrup and slow to move through the narrow passages that feed the bearings. Moisture that condensed inside the engine overnight is sitting on the metal, ready to turn to acid and rust. The cold piston rings have not yet expanded to seal tight, so combustion gases blow past them and foul the oil. Every one of these is at its worst in the first cold minute and eases as the engine warms, which is why that first minute, multiplied across 10,000 mornings in the life of a car, is where the engine is truly worn out. The mechanic could not have named all the chemistry. He simply knew that a cold engine was a fragile thing, and that you did not ask a fragile thing to work hard until you were certain it had everything it needed. So, what was the ritual actually protecting against? And why did a dipstick sit at the heart of it? Because the one thing that turns that ordinary cold start wear into a destroyed engine is running low on oil, and low oil is silent. An engine can be a full quart down, and give you not one sign of it from behind the wheel. It does not sputter, it does not warn you, it just runs with less and less of the one fluid standing between its moving parts and their own destruction, until the morning it starts up short, the pressure never fully builds, a bearing runs dry, and the engine tears itself apart from the inside. That is the failure that costs $4,000, $5,000, $8,000 to make right, if it can be made right at all. And the dipstick, pulled cold in the morning, is the one tool that catches it, because after a night of sitting, all the oil has drained back down into the pan where the dipstick can measure it honestly. That is why the morning, specifically, was the sacred time. It was not superstition, and it was not routine for its own sake. It was the one moment in the whole day when the reading was true. Check the oil right after the engine has been running, and half of it is still up in the works, clinging and draining, and the stick lies to you low. Check it cold, first thing, before the key is ever turned, and every drop is where it can be counted.
Before we go on, I made something special for you. A guide for men like us, who still believe a man should be able to keep his own car running. It's the Forgotten Mechanic's Handbook, the old-fashioned car repair secrets our grandfathers used to fix any engine and keep it running for decades. But these skills are disappearing fast, and once they're gone for good. Don't pay another mechanic ever again. Scan the QR code on screen or click the link below. Go ahead, I'll wait right here.
The Duluth mechanic read his oil at dawn, because dawn was when the engine could not fool him, and a man who cannot be fooled about his oil level is a man who will never lose an engine to the thing that kills the most of them. And the stick told him more than a level. He read the oil the way a doctor reads a pulse. The distance between the low mark and the full mark on a dipstick is, on most engines, about 1 quart. Which means a stick reading at the low line is already a full quart down and headed for trouble, not merely a little low. He looked at the color and the feel of it on his fingers. Good oil is amber and slick and clean. Oil gone milky or the color of coffee with cream means water or coolant is getting in where it must not. A warning of a failing gasket that is far cheaper caught on a dipstick than discovered in a wrecked engine. Oil gone black and gritty and thin, smelling of fuel, means it is long past its life and has stopped protecting anything. A man who pulled his stick every morning learned the normal of his own engine so well that the first morning something was wrong, he saw it instantly because he had 1,000 mornings of normal to compare it against. There is a right way to do it, and he taught it plainly. Park on level ground, because a car sitting on a slope throws the reading off. Read it cold in the morning, or if the engine has been running, shut it off and wait several minutes for the oil to drain back before you trust the stick. Wipe it once, reinsert it fully, and only then pull it to read, because that first draw is smeared and lies. And if you must add oil, add a little and check again, rather than dumping in a quart all at once. Because overfilling an engine is its own kind of harm, foaming the oil and stressing the seals. The whole discipline is nothing but care, done the same way every time, so that the number you read is the truth. There was more to the minute than the oil, though the oil was the heart of it. He looked under the car. A car that has sat all night will show you on the ground beneath it the thing it will never show you rolling down the road, a fresh drip that appeared while it slept. A spot of oil, a drop of coolant, a smear of something that was not there yesterday, is the earliest and cheapest warning a car ever gives that a seal or a hose or a gasket has begun to let go. Catch it as a spot on the driveway, and it is a few dollars and an afternoon. Miss it, and drive until the system runs dry, and it becomes the overheated engine, the seized compressor, the failure far from home. The morning glance under the car was free, and it read the ground like a page. He taught his customers to read that page by color because each fluid signs its own name on the concrete. A dark brown or black spot is engine oil. A slick red or pink one is transmission fluid or power steering fluid, the lifeblood of systems that are ruinous to run dry. A bright green, orange, or pink puddle with a sweet smell is coolant, and coolant on the ground in the cold country was a genuine emergency. He was careful to tell them the one drip that is harmless, the clear water that drips from under a car on a hot day, which is only the air conditioner doing its job and nothing to fear. Everything else that appears on the ground overnight is the car telling you where it has begun to fail, in the only language it has. At the one time of day you are standing still enough to read it. And he looked at the coolant, because the cold he worked in was merciless, and an engine that lost its coolant or ran it weak could freeze and crack a block solid in a single Duluth night, or boil itself to death on a hard pull. A look at the level, a thought for the strength of the mix as winter came on, cost nothing and stood between a man and a bill larger than most he would ever see. The whole ritual, the oil, the ground, the coolant, was nothing but a man spending 60 seconds every morning making certain that the three fluids his engine could not live without were all present and where they belonged before he asked that engine to do the hardest thing it did all day, which was simply to start in the cold. Here is the part of his story that explains why he never once skipped it. He had not always been so careful. He learned the ritual from the old man who ran the yard before him, a man who had kept trucks alive through the Depression and through winters with no money for a new anything, and who had buried the habit in the boy the hard way. For a whole winter, the old man made him check the oil and look under every truck in the yard before the drivers came, in the dark and the cold, and the boy hated it. Then, in February, a driver skipped the check on a truck the boy had not gotten to, drove it out a quart low on a morning colder than usual, and the engine let go on the highway before noon. The boy watched them drag it back and watched a good engine get pulled and scrapped over $1 worth of oil that no one had measured, and after that, he checked every engine every morning for the rest of his life. He understood then that the ritual was not about the oil. It was about the fact that the most expensive failures give no warning, and the only defense against a thing that gives no warning is to look every single day before it is too late. There was a widow in that town who drove an old sedan she could not afford to replace, and the mechanic checked it for her every time she came by for gas, because he knew she would never think to. One autumn morning, he pulled her stick and found it low enough that another few hundred miles would have finished the engine, and he traced it to a valve cover gasket weeping quietly onto the exhaust, where it burned off and left no puddle to warn her. It was an hour's work and a cheap part. He fixed it, topped her oil, and she drove that car another 8 years. She never knew how close she had come, because the whole point of the ritual is that when it works, nothing happens. And nothing happening is the quietest and most valuable thing a mechanic can give a person. He gave it every morning, with his own 2 hands, to people who mostly never knew they had received it. Add up what that minute saved, honestly, and the title's number turns out to be modest. A destroyed engine, spun bearings, a scored cylinder, a cracked block, is not a $3,000 repair. It is a $4,000 to $8,000 repair, often more than the car is worth, which is to say it is the end of the car. The morning ritual stood between the driver and that catastrophe, and it stood between him and all the smaller ones too. The leak caught as a spot instead of a breakdown, the coolant caught weak instead of frozen, the belt seen cracked instead of snapped. Stack the great disaster it prevented on top of the string of small ones it caught early, And $1's worth of rag and 60 seconds a morning saved a driver thousands of dollars over the life of a car, and saved some of them the whole car. Not as a promise on a study, as the plain arithmetic of never losing the engine that everyone else eventually lost. What makes this more than an old story is how ordinary the silent loss of oil actually is. Plenty of perfectly healthy engines burn a little oil as they run, a quart every 1,000 or 2,000 miles, so quietly that the driver never notices, and plenty more develop a slow seep from a gasket or a seal that leaves no puddle big enough to see. Either way, the level falls a little each week with no sign on the dashboard and no drama on the road, until a car that left the shop full 3 months ago is running dangerously low without its owner having the faintest idea. The driver who checks every morning catches that slow fall while it is a quart and a $2 top-off. The driver who waits for a warning light meets it as a knocking, smoking, finished engine. The whole difference between those two outcomes is a rag and a minute, applied before the trouble instead of after it. Now, the honest part, the part the Duluth mechanic would insist on if he were explaining this to you today, because a car in your driveway is not his 1958 truck. Some of what he did has changed, and pretending it has not will steer you wrong. He would tell you first that the old idea of letting a cold engine idle for 5 or 10 minutes to warm up is largely wrong on a modern car, and was always a blunt tool. A modern engine warms up fastest and wears least when you start it. Give it just a few seconds for the oil to move, and then drive it gently, under light load, until it comes up to temperature. Long idling only wastes fuel and keeps the engine cold longer. The real inheritance of his ritual is not the idle. It is the gentle first mile, no hard acceleration and no high revs until the temperature gauge has lifted off its peg, because that is when the oil has finally reached everywhere it needs to be. There is a reason the old idea took hold, and it is worth understanding so you can let it go with a clear mind. His 1958 engine had a choke and a carburetor, and on a cold morning it genuinely needed to fast idle for a little while just to run without stalling. So sitting in the driveway warming up was partly a necessity of the machine, not a gift to it. Modern fuel injection ended that. A car built in the last few decades will idle smoothly from the first second and warm fastest under a light, gentle load, which means the kindest thing you can do is start it, give the oil a few seconds to move, and drive away softly. The part of the old ritual that still holds with full force is the softness. Whether it is 1958 or today, you do not ask a cold engine to work hard until it is warm, because the oil is not yet where it needs to be, and the metal is not yet the size it needs to be. Gentle. For the first mile is the whole of it now, and it costs nothing but patience. He would tell you, too, that the oils and the metals are better now than anything he had. Modern multi-grade synthetic oils flow at cold temperatures that would have turned his 1958 oil to molasses, and they reach the top of the engine far faster on a winter morning, which is a real and genuine improvement in exactly the moment that matters most. Modern engines are built to tighter tolerances and last longer than his ever could. But none of that has repealed the physics. Oil still drains down overnight. Pressure still takes a few seconds to build. The cold start is still the hardest moment in the engine's day, only less brutal than it was, and a quart low is still a quart low. The better oil buys you a wider margin. It does not buy you the right to stop looking. In the cold country he worked, there was one more piece of the morning worth knowing, and it has come back into use. In deep cold, the smartest drivers plugged their engines in overnight to a block heater, a small element that kept the coolant and the oil warm enough that the morning start was gentle instead of violent. And in Duluth in winter, a row of cars on a cold night trailed their cords to the outlets like animals on a tether. It was the one way to soften the cruelest cold start of all, the one at 30 below, where even good oil struggles and the engine that fires dry pays the steepest toll of the year. A block heater then, and now, turns the worst morning of the winter into an ordinary one, and it is still the single best thing a driver in a hard climate can do for an engine, alongside the dipstick that tells him what that engine has to work with. And he would tell you the one thing that has genuinely complicated his ritual, which is that some modern cars have taken the dipstick away entirely, replacing it with an electronic oil level readout in the dash. On those cars, you check the oil through the menu instead of by hand, and you learn the trick your particular car needs, checking it cold and on level ground, because the principle has not changed even though the stick is gone. On every car that still has a dipstick, which is most of them, the morning check is exactly what it was in Duluth in 1958. Pull it, wipe it, read it cold, look at the level, and look at the color. Because oil gone milky means coolant is getting in, and oil gone gritty and black past its time means it is overdue. And both of those are cheap to fix now and ruinous to ignore. If reading this has you thinking about the last time you actually checked your own oil, cold, with your own hands, that is the whole point, and it costs you nothing to start tomorrow morning. Hit that subscribe button and then go out before you drive, lift the hood, and find out what your engine is really running on. None of this was ever complicated, and that is exactly why we let it go. It was a rag, a dipstick, a glance at the ground, and 1 minute of attention paid at the hardest moment of the engine's day before the cold start could do its quiet damage to an engine already running short. The Duluth mechanic understood that the failures that end cars are the silent ones, the ones that give no warning right up until the morning they give no second chance, and that the only weapon against them is the daily habit of looking. He looked every morning, in the dark and the cold, for 30 years, and he did not lose engines, because you cannot be surprised by a thing you check for every single day. The habit faded for the same quiet reason so many of these did. In 1958, a man in a uniform checked your oil for you every time you bought gas, dipstick in hand, and when self-service ended that, the daily reading of the oil simply passed out of American life with almost no one noticing it go. In its place came a light on the dash, and the light felt like enough, and so the rag went back in the drawer and stayed there. But the light and the ritual were never the same thing, and mistaking one for the other has cost a great many people a great many engines. We did not give up the ritual because it stopped working. It works exactly as well this morning, on the car in your driveway, as it did on a truck in Duluth in 1958, because the engine has not changed its nature and the cold start has not grown any kinder. We gave it up because a warning light replaced the habit of looking, and a warning light, like the low oil light on your dash, was built to come on when you are already in trouble, not to keep you out of it. The dipstick tells you a quart is low while it is still just a quart. The light tells you when the damage has begun. One is a ritual, the other is a eulogy. The old man in Duluth kept his rag in his coat pocket until the morning he handed the yard over, and on that last day, in the cold before dawn, he walked a young man out to the first truck, pulled the dipstick, wiped it, and pressed it into his hands. "Read it cold," he said, "every engine, every morning. Before you ever turn the key, it is $1 a minute, And it is the difference between an engine that dies at 90,000 miles and one that outlives the man who owns it. Then he stood back in the dark and watched the young man read his first one, and he nodded because the ritual had found another pair of hands, and it would live one more generation before the cold could take it.